Thank you very much. Thank you. It is my great pleasure to be here participating in this seminar on biodiversity and evolution. And that's mainly because my core incumbencies at CBU are not directly related to pedagogics or tuition, but with science, diplomacy, and management. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Paulo-CIBIO Alves for the invitation, for hosting the seminar, and also for this kind for this kind introduction, and also Dr. Dora Bastos and Dr. Raquel Vasconcelos for the logistics support. Well, I will repeat myself, but just for saying that my name is Carlos Almeida Pereira. I'm currently the executive coordinator of the UNESCO Share Life on Land of the University of Porto, also of the program of Twin Labs of CBU in Africa. I'm a former teacher and researcher in the areas of philosophy of science, ethics, neuroethics, culture and cultural heritage, but since 2012, I have been dedicated myself to the areas of science, technology and innovation, management and policies, also scientific diplomacy, and more recently to biodiversity conservation, sustainable development, and natural heritage protection. And it is in that context that I develop my work at CBU. Curiously, in this seminar, I will return to my original metrics as my proposal, as Professor Paulo-CIBIO Alves has said, is to expound on ethics, namely in ethics and its potential relation and importance in biodiversity conservation and protection. So I think that you all can see my slides. I will start now sharing them. And this is my proposal for the next minutes. I have four main topics in the outline. First, I will present some conceptual notes on ethics and biodiversity, namely the concepts of ethics and bioethics and human impact in the, sorry, let me just move this here because I cannot see my slides. And the human impact in the ecological system. Then I will move for the global biodiversity crisis, the specific impact on the African continent, and some of the scientific mitigation strategies that have been put into place in order to mitigate this issue. Then a third topic will be about the epistemic approach and a question from my side, what can be improved in this scenario? And finally, just before the discussion, my proposal, my specific proposal that I call the ethical approach to biodiversity crisis. So let's start with the first topic, ethics and biodiversity. Namely these concept notes on ethics, bioethics, and human impact in the ecological system. We can ask what is ethics, and generically, no definition of ethics begins without distinguishing this concept of the concept of moral. Although moral is also concerning with the principles of right and wrong in human behavior, this notion refers to a set of rules of conduct or action that are externally assigned to the individual. Ethics, in turn, refers categorically for the specific interiority inherent to each human being, and in my perspective, this difference is fundamental. In etymological terms, ethics finds its roots in two classical Greek terms. The first one is ethos, a more archaic terminology, originally linked to military dialects, meaning in that case sentry box for the soldier, and pastoral dialects, meaning in this case burrow or place where animals are kept. The other Greek term is ethos, with a different spelling, meaning habit, custom, character, and way of being acquired by humans through the repetition of acts. Well, it is based on these references that, in philosophical terms, ethics acquired the status of constitutive dimension of the human being and of place where the acts originate. But well, leaving aside the dust of philosophical treatises, I believe that ethics may be simply defined as the reflexive capability of human intelligence to individually appraise the good and the evil after a deliberation by reference to values. But the question remains, why is ethics important in the field of biodiversity? In recent times, since the 17th of the previous millennium, we have witnessed the emergence and establishment of the transdisciplinary field of bioethics, let's say a kind of an ethics for biothings. But matter of fact, this educational area is most recognized by the importance of its reflection in the context of some emblematic media dilemmas arising from the outbreak of new biomedical technologies and their application in the areas of health, namely the stem cells research, cloning, euthanasia, or the equitable allocation of health resources. But bioethics is much more than only medical ethics, as it also develops strong concerns with the environment, and in fact, this was its original field of emergence when, during the 1970 decade, a strong theoretical reflection was developed on the possibility of an ecological global collapse. Moreover, following the concerns already from the middle of the 20th century, arising from the identification of the first consequences of climate change, of the population outbreak after World War II, of the massive exploitation of non-renewable natural resources, and of the consolidation of new technologies, mainly atomical, chemical, and biological ones, which gave human beings the unprecedented power to destroy the planet itself. In this way, and in view of the more than evident impact of humanity in the ecological system, bioethics emerge as a science for survival. In any case, seeing that the changes in the biosphere, driven mainly by human cultural habits and technological advances, are shifting the direction of evolution on Earth, with ongoing and permanent changes modifying uncountable interactions between organisms, the environment, and humankind itself, with numerous species getting extinct, the need for an ethical reflection in the field of biodiversity emerges, in my perspective, as an imperative. Okay, advancing a little further in this reflection, now for the second point of my talk, the global biodiversity crisis, we may say that despite its comprehensive character and impact, it is on the African continent that its effect is the most detrimental, wherein this problem is further aggravated there due to the gap of knowledge in this respect in the great majority of the African continent. Of the African countries. We all know that Africa has a countless wealth in biodiversity. Its living organisms constitute about a quarter of the overall global picture, and African biomes range from mangroves to deserts, from Mediterranean to tropical forests, from temperate to subtropical and mountain savanna, and even to ice-covered peaks, as Brian Nantley et al. Tell us in the book from 2019, Biodiversity of Angola. African countries reveal a remarkable profusion and variety with regard to plant and animal life, a striking beauty of its plains and plateaus, its forests and woods, a remarkable physiography, a climatic and biological variety, and a rich diversity of landscapes and seascapes, some of the highest rates of diversity of biomes and ecoregions, and several African countries are included in the worldwide biodiversity hotspots, and in all of them is absolutely recognizable a pronounced wealth of wildlife and vegetation and uniqueness and scientific value of their natural heritage. Notwithstanding its richness in terms of biological diversity, African countries face serious risks in the circumstance of the global environmental crisis, and generically, they face unprecedented challenges on attempting to reconcile human well-being and economic prosperity with the protection of the surrounding environment. At the same time, they are threatened with severe environmental risks, mainly through a rampant population growth, being that this results in extensive demographic pressure scenarios, supplemented by processes of unregulated urbanization with the subsequent binomial pollution diseases, and intensive agricultural exploitation. Well, this situation has a harmful impact on the natural environment, which is in some situations critically damaged and of difficult immediate restoration. Consequently, Consequently, the development of mitigation research strategies is pointed as a priority, namely in the sense of promoting collaborative actions among European and African countries to address, for instance, the Aichi goals or the objectives of the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations regarding biodiversity. We can highlight some of these mitigation strategies as, for instance, the import, adaptation, and operationalization of international mechanisms and best practice to support the right use of ecosystems, the implementation of large-scale conservation actions to avoid losses of biodiversity, the preparation of applications from African parks to world biodiversity reserves, the strengthening of cross-border joint actions with neighboring countries in the areas of biodiversity, the consolidation of the process of involvement of local communities, or the development of ongoing reinforcement of competency schemes in African countries, including institutional capacity building for the implementation of international biodiversity conventions. Notwithstanding all of these strategies,
Carlos, deixamos de te ouvir.
Pois, pensei que era do meu computador, mas não é. Carlos?
Carlos?
Sorry, everybody, we have a problem that Carlos lost the connection. Please just, Carlos?
yes, I'm here.
Okay, so you just, it was a bad connection. Please, just you have to share again the slides. I'm sorry about that.
Let me try again. Well, for some reason now I cannot open it.
Okay, maybe you have to do stop sharing and then share again.
Okay, let me try to do that.
It's in the up part of the screen.
Okay. Please let me know if you can see it now.
Yes, we see it
Yes.
clearly. Can you just go back a bit because we heard you like, and then it was frozen.
Okay. Okay. We are talking about the scientific mitigation strategies. I believe that you can hear my comments on these slides,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so returning a little bit to this topic, I was about to saying that notwithstanding all of these strategies and the profusion of plans, literature and programs in this regard, solid results are taking too long time to emerge. And in fact, I believe that the situation, the degradation of environmental ecosystems in Africa has been exacerbated itself in recent years. And this way, I think that we can legitimately question from an ethical perspective what can be improved in this scenario. And the answer, in my standpoint, is the following. If prospects of mitigation of the impacts of biodiversity crisis via scientific research strategies are certainly the most sensible solution, for a long-term sustainability of this approach, it would be crucial to conjugate them with consolidated mental structuration methodologies. Otherwise, it will fall short of the intended results in the absence of a paradigm shift. But prior to expand a little bit on what those mental structuration methodologies may be, let me provide an example. It is based in the scientific research methodologies that referential documents, both pedagogical, I mean for academic uses, or institutional United Nations documents, for instance, are normally developed. And those referential documents, even the Agenda 2030 of United Nations, no matter how good intention they may intend to be, and I know they are, they unfortunately refer for normative guidelines that appeal for the need to adopt environmental protection measures or for the urgency to assume a moderate, prudent, adequate, and equitable use of bio-based consumables, only due to the fact that it is from nature that we obtain the resources, both biological and genetic, essential for human survival, which will obviously disappear if they are not used carefully and if nature is not taken care of. Well, despite the relative relevance of this position, even because we all need to recognize that sometimes there is no other way to appeal to people's sensitivity other than referring to the vital dangers for humanity itself of an environmental collapse, this rhetoric ends up resulting in a form of anthropocentrism, even with some utilitarian traits, due to the fact that it proposes the protection of the environment, the biosphere and biodiversity, only because they are important to humanity for its well-being, its health, and even its survival. But returning to the mental structuration methodologies, what do I mean? Well, what I mean, and this is what I call the ethical approach, is that it is also necessary to refer for the preeminence of the intrinsic value of natural ecosystems in view of its inherent ontological and ethical relevance, and it should be strongly emphasized, although even also in correlation with the importance of biodiversity for communities' economic and social prosperity. And the underlying rationale of my cogitation is quite simple. On failing the dissemination of a mindset and attitudinal change which firmly exalt the inherent significance of the axiological dimension of the environment, besides its instrumental importance for humankind, I believe that the current detrimental anthropocentric pattern will be perpetuated, as well as the harmful consequences arising from it. In practical terms, even in an optimistic scenario, in which, from the application of the research strategies and actions previously stated, an environmental recovery may occur, triggering in people the awareness about the tangible importance of biodiversity itself, the risk of incurring in the previous inaccuracies in the medium term will be always hanging over threateningly. Because once momentarily mitigated the menaces for populations themselves, relapsing in harmful behaviors may always be a possibility in the absence of an endemic reverence by the surrounding environment. At the same time, the motivation for the properly action in this respect should also be intrinsic and not only derived from external conventions or normative systems, namely national or regional regulatory frameworks with penalizing schemes for the infractions, as in the hypothetical absence of the concerning law enforcement, the trigger for the ethical accomplishments will fade away. The challenge, therefore, is still beyond the recognition of the high importance of natural surroundings for current and future human generations, as exceeding the short-term gains that are the cause of the most biological diversity loss. The challenge is to raise awareness to the fact that environment has a perceived value that surpasses human referrals, and its obliteration is intrinsically immoral, and not only by reference to our human condition and our basic civilizational and social needs. How to do that? How to raise awareness? The answer, as almost always, is education. You know, if a direct correlation between education and behavioral change seems unquestionable, in our specific case, we have at our disposal some educational schemes that allow us to take this approach, as these masters, doctoral courses, or seminars in biodiversity. And for the context of the program of Twin Labs of CBIO in Africa, maybe the most of you are aware of this program as part of the internationalization strategy of CBIO, we are already putting into action this plan. Encompassed in our capacity building activities, we are organizing an international master course between the University of Porto and University Mandumbian Demufio, an Angolan higher education institution, partner of our Twin Lab of Angola. And this master will be in biodiversity, genetics, and conservation, and it will apply in the city of Lubango. The curricular organization of this master is very similar to the one from University of Porto, but among its syllabus, it is proposed precisely the discipline on ethics and biodiversity. In addition to seeking to request for a reflection on the intrinsic value of biodiversity and on the need for a perceived respect that is due to the surrounding environment, regardless of an instrumental importance to humanity, the objective of the discipline is thereof, in view of the global biodiversity crisis and the subsequent progressive importance that has been assigned to the discussion about the complex environmental dilemmas, to promote an in-depth reflection and the structuring of ethical frameworks, values and principles that may provide personal guidance and a theoretical background for policy options in this area. At the same time, it will be sought to provide excellent training in ethical issues related to biological diversity in order to afford students with a general understanding of the concept of biodiversity, the fundamentals and principles of ethics, the values for sustainable management, of the laws and governance strategies involved in biological diversity preservation, and on the ethical issues that need to be considered for the genesis of policies and strategies for biodiversity conservation. The study plan of the discipline encompasses several curricular modules, as for instance, ethics and biodiversity, in which the notions of ethics, bioethics will be discussed, and several other topics will be addressed, as the ethical approaches to the environment, ethical issues of extinction, or ethical options for the future. Another model would be value of biodiversity on the issues of categories of value, world approaches to values, or biodiversity in world culture. Another one will be law, governance, and biodiversity, referring to international law, conventions on biodiversity, or ecotourism. And just to providing another example, a model on ethics in policies and strategies in preserving biodiversity, focusing on concepts as sustainability, biodiversity and environmental movements, economics, lifestyle change, or tourism policy. Well, I believe that I already took too much of your time, but I hope it may have contributed to arousing your curiosity to this issue of the importance of ethics in biodiversity. In any case, with this presentation, I don't want to impose any kind of vision or perspective that would not even be ethical from my side. The idea is only to reflect on what can be improved with regard to biodiversity management and conservation, of course coming with a proposal that I believe to be original, structured and reasoned, but only as a scenario for joint reflection so that together we can find the best solutions to the problems that still surrounding us. So thank you very much for your attention.